Welcome and thank you for investing your time in our short program today. I'm joined by Mark Petaccio, our Tame resident behavioural economist in a jumper. And in light of Boris Johnson's roadmap out of lockdown on Monday, the 22nd of Feb, I thought it'd be interesting to get Mark's view. So Mark, interesting point for me was in the preamble beforehand, it talked about this was going to be a data-driven set of events and not data-driven, and yet everyone I'm talking to is just fixated on the dates. So in line of that, what's your view overall of the message on Monday?
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? Because we've been cautioning people against anchoring on dates throughout this pandemic, and now we've got a whole series of dates for people to anchor on. Again, we just sort of repeat what we've said, that anchoring on dates and expecting something to happen, and then you arrive at that date and it hasn't, can have a real psychological detrimental effect on your well-being. So it's better not to anchor on dates at all if you can. Now, obviously, that's very difficult to do if you're in the process of opening a business up again and things like that. You have to have dates to work with, especially if you're in your hospitality, you're dealing with perishable goods and things like that, and you're sort of remobilizing your staff, etc. But generally speaking, it's just anchoring on dates. And again, you're risking that event not happening can be detrimental to our well-being. So, and even if you have to do it, and it's very difficult not to do it, one thing to try and do is, instead of anchoring on a date that's forward, and so you're saying, well, okay, all the restrictions are going to be lifted on the 21st of June, that's miles away, is actually to look back maybe 7 or 8 weeks and go, look how far we've come since the vaccination rollout started. So rather than getting a sense of how far away you are from where you want things to be, it's better to look backwards and feel that how much progress has been made. So in other words, you start from where you are rather than where you want to be. I mean, anyone who's ever sort of injured themselves and been in plaster, for example, that, it's 6 weeks away, or actually you're better than you were yesterday. You're a bit better than you were the day before that. So again, it's feeling that sense of progress. And actually, some organisations, the military, they really do test resilience around this. So a good friend of mine, he was doing SAS training, and he had one of these really, really tough days. And he came to the end of what they all thought was the last there was quite heavy physical exercise. And he came into the last checkpoint, and they said, right, okay, there's now another stage, and you now have to go to this point, which was about another 10 miles on. And actually, he went round the corner and there was the truck there to pick them up. It had actually finished. What they were testing was simply his reaction to being told, it's not finished, you're going again. And if there was any negative reaction at all, he would have obviously failed the assessment. So it happens in all, this is a well-known psychological concept. So if you can avoid putting yourself even in the position of feeling that, you've arrived at this point and it hasn't happened, and the detriment it can have on, if you can actually avoid doing that by not anchoring on dates, that is the best thing you can do if you can.
That's easier said than done, isn't it? Because
much easier said than done. Yes.
Well, it's easier said than done, because for me, I'm sure other people, we're now praying for the 8th of March with our kids to go back to school and clubs, but we can't help but be fixated with it. But there is a definite, I don't know if you agree, a sense of even more hope with the success of the vaccine rollout and people seeing the end in sight. But what do you think people can do now to get ready, as it were, for whatever happens? So what's your view about sort of getting ready to get ready for whatever does get triggered in the future?
Well, I think we should acknowledge what an incredible feat the vaccine rollout actually is. I think sometimes we should maybe stop and think, £220 billion has been pumped into an economy. So we're actually, compared to a lot of friends I have in different parts of the world, we're in a phenomenally fortunate state. But again, I would take a step back and actually cherish the now a little bit. Next time you're on the, you're crushed standing on the 719 into King's Cross, you might well be getting those feelings of nostalgia when you didn't have to commute into London. There are communities that have come together. There's a lot of very, very positive experiences in the pandemic, even the experiences with children being closer to your family. A lot of people have reported that. I'm not being churlish about it. We are living in a pandemic, and obviously that's been horrendous in so many ways. But there are other things that I think we can, we can embrace about the experience. And I think sometimes we should make sure that we've appreciated those before we then get ready, as you put it. I think there are so many different aspects of this. I think it's interesting. You mentioned children. I think sending children back to school and telling them that they're behind when they've spent the whole pandemic probably working very hard, I don't think it's a very positive message. And that's all I'm hearing when I listen to the media, how far behind children are. Actually, I'm not sure that is necessarily the case. Certainly the teachers I know feel that some children have flourished in this. But I think even that message is not, a particularly positive one. But with everybody, if you're running a business and you've got staff, it's reaching out to people, continuing to reach out to people to make sure that they know what's expected of them, and just making sure that everybody's still okay. Right the way through this, we've said stock up on goodwill, empathy and compassion, and that is still a very, very relevant message.
Spot on, Mark. I mean, looking even today at the present, you're talking about whether you're a business owner, whether you're a parent, employee, self-employed. I know some people are furloughed, but I get a massive sense that people are very busy. It's either busy trying to be a part-time homeschooler, look after your job, dealing with clients from home, that time, all of that stuff. Everyone seems to be very busy, but they are saying to me things like there is this underlying feeling of sort of like an underlying low, the monotony. So whether you're furloughed or whether you're busy as hell, the monotony piece. So do you think that's a fair thing? And also, what you've done really well, I feel, is actually give some pragmatic tips of how to cope with the here and now. So what would you say around that at the moment, what we're doing in the present?
There have been lots of reports of people hearing I've Got You, Babe, at 6 o'clock every morning on their radio. It's that Groundhog Day feeling. The research we've done and talking to a lot of people, this lockdown has felt a bit like a limbo lockdown. There's not the same sense that we're all in it together. Someone was telling me recently, said, well, we're not supposed to be travelling. Well, how come there always seems to be a traffic jam on the M4 and things like that? The schools are definitely busier. So there is a different sense of this. And I think we should be mindful that winter evenings as well does restrict the time, that you can go out. And so that can have quite a negative effect as well. So there is that underlying feeling of this is the same day over and over again. A friend of mine said it didn't help that much of the day was on every night during the week. He said instead of it being a sort of Saturday or weekend experience, it was happening every day. He said every day just felt like the same. So there's an element of that. The biggest tip, one of the biggest tips, again, we've said right the way through, be very mindful of the sources you use to consume your media. I've always said I get the impression that a lot of people on the media seem to want to be the news rather than just report it. And a lot of it, so many people have said, since you told me to stop listening to phone-ins and stop watching Question Time, I feel so much better, because that's where all the anger is spilled, Twitter, things like that. If you can avoid those sources and just try and concentrate on the positive, I think that's really important. Even after the briefing, I was listening to the briefing, and the questions that the Prime Minister was being asked, they were just, look, there's an announcement here to the nation about how we're coming out of a major crisis. And there you've got media people asking self-serving questions to try and get that headline, and it really isn't what we need. So be very mindful, I think, of your sources, and try and make sure that that your sources are positive, because how situations are framed really does matter. Like I say, if the world's going to hell in a handcart, it tends to get you down. If people are concentrating on the positive messages, then it has a very different impact on your psychology and therefore your well-being. So be mindful of the sources that you're using to consume your news and your media.
Spot on. And the other things I think people have said have been working really well is the advice about routine, but doesn't mean you have to do the same things monotonously every day. It can be just varying, but knowing your plan. It's me time, but today it might be a walk, but tomorrow it might be a jog. It might be just reading a book, but they're putting that time as a routine. Do you think there's still, the contradiction between routine and monotony is quite close, isn't it? How do you balance that, do you think?
Well, it depends how enjoyable your routine is. If it's enjoyable, it's not monotonous, is it? So it really depends what you're doing. But that it's easy to say, but it is so important to get outside every day. And the benefits of exercise are well known. Again, you can sit inside, you can consume media, and you can get angry. And we've talked about the grief curve on several of these sort of previous broadcasts, and moving away from anger into acceptance as soon as you can. That's where all your control lies. When you know what you can control and what you can't control, once you have acceptance of the situation, you regain all your power and all your control, and that's so important. So, I wouldn't want to preach anyone about what a great routine is, but just having those things to look forward to. Our daughter bought us a poster with the top 100 films on it for Christmas. And after you've watched each film, you sort of, like a scratch card, you rub away a symbol of the film. And we've been watching and rewatching films in the evening we haven't watched for years, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And we're marking them all out of 10. It's creating great debate across the family. Things like that. Again, you are still in control of what you can do. We're a long way from all the restrictions being lifted, so it's still about catching up on those podcasts that you wanted to listen to, decorating that room that you haven't got round to, whatever you decide it's going to be, whatever books you want to read or films you want to watch, whatever it is, using this time and carving that time out for yourself is really important.
Great, thanks, Mark. So in summary then, what's, time-honored sort of interview questionnaire type thing, what 3 things would you like people to remember as part of listening to your words today? Well,
again, without being flippant, because I'm very conscious we are in, still in a major emergency, and whilst we're all in the same storm, we are in very different boats. So for people who have actually their businesses have done well in the pandemic, to those that have been completely shut, and I've got friends of mine that are looking to open their businesses up. So we're in very, very different boats from that perspective. But I think generally speaking, the 3 things I'd say is first, try not to anchor on these time frames and these dates if you can at all help it. If you feel you have to, then look backwards first to how far we've come to the point we're at, rather than look forward with a view of how far we've still got to go. So in other words, start from where we are now, not where we want to be. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing is be mindful of your media and your sources. Try and surround yourself with positive messages rather than divisive debates that you tend to find. And there are still plenty of positive messages out there that you can listen to. And the third thing is cherish the now. There are still very positive experiences with family, friends, community that we're having at the moment. So I would say cherish those. And as we've always said, keep those stocks of goodwill, empathy and compassion replenished, because we will need them for some time to come.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. As insightful and pragmatic as ever. And also thank you for the short notice of putting this together, because I know you could say we knew that the announcement was coming up for a while. We didn't actually think about doing this for short notice. So thank you very much for investing your time. And no doubt we'll look forward to the next insights and words of wisdom as we go through that roadmap to out of lockdown. So thanks very much.
Not at all, Paul. I hope it's helpful. Thank you.